The night Marine knelt on the black stone of Hollow Reach's receiving hall. The lie she had been breathing for 3 years finally had a room big enough to die in. Torchlight slid across the silver handle of the whip her own mate had folded on top of the trunk, and the iron of the cuffs beneath it caught the same orange, like an answering tooth. Below those, a slip of black silk, folded with a care that had nothing to do with kindness. She had not been the one to pack it. She had watched Kalen do it in the gray hour before dawn, his fingers smoothing the silk like he was setting a stage for a play he had already seen the ending of. And she had thought, because she had been trained for 3 years to think this, that he was grieving. What she did not yet know was that the trunk was not a goodbye. It was a costume, and it was being sent to a man whose costume was the only honest thing he wore. The savage alpha king of Hollow Reach crossed the hall toward her with the unhurried weight of a storm front, and the court parted for him not the way courtiers part for a king, but the way grass parts for a scythe. He did not look at her face. He looked at the trunk. He reached down and lifted the whip by its silver throat, and her nose, the nose Ashfall had bred and bartered and bled, opened on him the way a window opens on weather. She tasted iron and old smoke, and the bitter green of a tonic she did not know the name of. She tasted 3 kills that morning before breakfast, and not one of them apologetic. She tasted the absence of cruelty toward anything small. She tasted, under all of it, no interest in her back whatsoever. He weighed the whip in his hand the way a butcher weighs a knife he already knows the heft of, and her gift told her, calm as a coroner, that he absolutely would use it. On someone, not on her. He set the whip down again on the lid of the trunk, not on her shoulders, and the click of the silver against the wood was the first soft sound he had made since entering the room.
Who packed this trunk?
4 words. Not a question exactly. A door opening. She lifted her face. She had been told to keep it down. She lifted it anyway. The king of Hollow Reach was tall in the way the keep itself was tall, all shoulders and gray eyes, and a scar that ran from the corner of his mouth down under the collar of a black coat that had seen war and not bothered to apologize for it. He looked at her, and she watched him try to read her, the way he had read every enemy who had ever stood in this hall. And she watched. With a small private shock, she did not let onto her face. His nostrils flare and find nothing. Nothing. Not fear, not arousal, not lie, not truth. Her gift ran one way, and his ran the other, and for the first time in his life, the savage alpha king was standing in front of a tribute mate he could not taste. He did not show it, but she saw him register it the way a swordsman registers a missing step on a familiar stair. His jaw flexed, once, then nothing. Speak. She did. My mate. Her voice surprised her by holding. Kalen of Ashfall. He packed it. A flicker behind his eyes. She tasted it before she saw it. A hot copper note of something that was not surprise and was not anger, and was, instead, a recognition older than this conversation. He set 2 fingers on the silver handle of the whip and traced it once, slowly. Stand up. She stood. Her knees did not shake, which felt like a small theft from Kalen, who had told her, over and over in the gray hour, to kneel and stay kneeling, and weep prettily if she could manage it. The king walked a half circle around her, and she felt the keep watching, the iron sconces watching, the long stone gallery above where Hollow Reach's court leaned on the rail, like crows on a fence. She kept her hands at her sides. He stopped behind her. He did not touch her.
The chains at my gates are real.
His voice was lower up close, the kind of low that did not need to be loud because nothing in the room was permitted to make noise over it. The whip on my belt is not decoration. The tribute mates before you walked out of this keep marked. You will have been told all of this. Yes, and you came. I was sent. A pause. Not the same word. No. Behind her, very quiet, almost as if to himself, he said something she would replay for the rest of her life. Then we will find out which one is true. He stepped away. 2 stewards moved at his glance and lifted the trunk and carried it from the hall, the silver-handled whip riding the top of it like a flag of the wrong country. The king did not give her his arm. He turned, and she understood she was to follow, and as she did, her gift caught one last note off him at the threshold. Not a hum, not a thread, but a single, steady line of song held under all the noise of the hall, like the one true note in a chord that had finally found something to land on. She did not know yet what it was. She only knew that it had been waiting. The corridor he took her down was older than the receiving hall, the stones gray-veined and cold to the breath, and she walked half a pace behind him because no one had told her where to walk, and she had learned in 3 years of Kaelin's house to make herself a small, useful shadow. The king did not speak. He did not slow. He did not look back to check that she followed. He did not have to. The keep around them was awake, in the way fortresses are awake at the arrival of something interesting, and she could feel eyes at every arrow slit, every doorway, every torch bracket where a guard had paused too long to polish a buckle. Her gift kept opening on them as she passed, involuntary, the way a hand opens when something falls into it. Curiosity mostly. A little pity from one older woman in a doorway who smelled of bread and clean linen. Wariness from the 2 guards who fell in behind them at a respectful distance. Nothing in the corridor that smelled like the kind of cruelty Ashfall had warned her about. Cruelty was a particular note to her. A sour green under copper, and she had spent 3 years pretending she could not pick it out of Kaelin's mouth when he came home from his border runs. She had told herself every time that what she was smelling was tiredness. The black-winged crow flew in through an open window at the top of the stairs and landed on the king's shoulder, and the king did not flinch. He did not even glance at it. The bird tilted its head and looked at Marie, and Marie, who had raised it from a half-feathered fledgling in the kennel loft and called it Van because it had hopped after her like a small black shadow, felt her chest go briefly and stupidly tight. Van had followed her. Van had come with the cart, and she had not let herself believe it the whole long road because Kaelin had said the bird belonged to the kennels, and Kaelin had said many things. The king walked on. The bird stayed on his shoulder another 3 strides, then lifted, sailed past Marie's ear with a soft caw that was very nearly a greeting, and settled on the iron sconce above the door they were approaching. The king pushed the door open with one hand and stood aside, and she understood without being told that this was where she would sleep. It was not a cell. It was not either a bedchamber laid out for seduction. It was a room, a real one, with a hearth already lit, a deep window onto the moors, a basin of water still steaming, a low table with bread and cheese and a clay cup, and a bed with linens that smelled, when her nose reached for them, of cedar and lye, and nothing else. Nothing left over from another woman, nothing perfumed to hide what had happened in it. Just clean. He did not come in.
He stood in the doorway, and the torchlight fell across the long scar at his mouth, and he looked at her for what felt like the first real time. "Eat." She nodded. "Sleep if you can."
She nodded again. "The bonding ceremony is at the next moonrise. You will be brought to the grove. Until then, this door is not locked, and no one in this keep will touch you. If anyone does, you find me." She opened her mouth. He cut her off with a look. "Not a guard. Me." "Yes." A pause. He glanced once briefly at the trunk where the stewards had set it at the foot of the bed, the silver-handled whip still lying across the lid. His mouth did something that was not quite a smile. "Do not unpack that trunk." "I wasn't going to." A second flicker behind his eyes, that copper note again, sharper this time. "Good." He pulled the door shut. She stood very still in the middle of the room and listened to his footsteps go, and then to the smaller, careful steps of one of the guards taking up a post in the corridor, outside the door, between her and the keep, not between her and the window. Not a jailer. A wall. She walked to the window. The moors went on forever in the dark. Somewhere out there, 3 days behind her, Kaylin was sitting at the long oak table in the kennel house, drinking the bitter tea he liked and believing, she understood it now in a slow, cold wave, that she was being beaten by a man in a black coat. He had packed the trunk for that man. He had folded the silk for that man. He had laid the whip on top so that the king of Hollowreach would see the kind of woman Ashfall thought he wanted, and would use her accordingly, and would send her body back in pieces sufficient to declare blood debt paid and the Ashfall border redrawn 3 miles north into Hollowreach grainland. She had not understood any of this on the road. She understood it now because the king of Hollowreach had picked up the whip and put it down, and the keep around her smelled, against every promise Ashfall had made her, like a place where no one had ever been hurt for the entertainment of anyone else. Van the Crow landed on the windowsill. She put 2 fingers out very slowly. The bird stepped onto them with the small dignity of a creature who had decided, at last, whose hand it was on. She slept 4 hours she had not expected to sleep, and woke in the gray hour before dawn the way she always woke in the gray hour, because 3 years of sleeping next to Kaylin had taught her body that the gray hour was when he got up to write his letters. She lay very still on the cedar-smelling bed and let her gift open on the keep around her without moving, because that was the other thing 3 years of Kaylin had taught her, that you learned more from a room when the room did not know you were learning. The keep smelled like a barracks at rest, banked fires, oiled steel, bread proving in a kitchen 2 floors down, a horse somewhere needing its stall mucked, wool, a faint thread of pipe smoke from the guard outside her door, no fear in any of it, no woman's tears in any corner, no old blood under any rug. She had been in great houses before, on Kaylin's arm, where the rugs had quietly screamed. This keep did not scream. She sat up. Van was on the bedpost, asleep with one eye half open the way crows sleep when they have decided they are responsible for someone. She reached out and touched the soft place under his beak, and he made the small chuck-chuck noise that had once meant in the kennel loft that he was hungry and forgiving her for it. She thought about the years of him sitting on Kaylin's shoulder while Kaylin wrote letters. She thought about how Kaylin had taught the bird to fly the river road and come back with nothing in his claws and a small folded paper tucked under the leather band at his ankle, and how Kaylin had laughed and called him a clever beast and given him bits of liver from her plate. She had thought every time that the letters were love notes to his sister in the South,
Her sister-in-law had been dead 2 years before Marie ever met Kaylin.
She had not known that until last night, when her gift had finally been permitted to read a room that was not Kaylin's, and had begun, by contrast, to read backward through every room she had ever stood in with him. The crow opened both eyes and looked at her. "You knew," she said softly. Van did not deny it. He preened one wing. There was a soft knock at the door. She tensed before she could stop herself, and her gift opened, and the person on the other side of the door smelt like bread and clean linen and a faint sweet trace of honey, and she remembered the older woman in the corridor doorway last night and felt her shoulders come back down. "Come in." The door opened. The woman who stepped through was perhaps 50, broad and brown-handed and steady on her feet, with gray shot black hair braided back from a face that had laughed often and recently. She carried a tray. She did not curtsy. She set the tray on the low table and looked at Marie with a frank, assessing kindness that Marie had not been looked at with in 3 years. "I'm Shayna. I run the king's kitchens, and most of his patients. He said you'd want breakfast and not want company with it, so I'll go. But I'll come back at noon with a dress that isn't whatever Ashfall thought you should die in, and you and I will see about getting you into something the court can't make a meal of. Yes?" Marie nodded, because her throat had gone briefly useless. Shayna paused at the door. "He also said," she added, with the careful neutrality of a woman repeating something exactly, "that you are not to be touched by anyone in this keep, and that if anyone tries, you are to find him. Not a guard, him. I am repeating that because, in my experience, tribute girls do not believe it the first time, and the king prefers to be believed." "I believe it." Shayna studied her another half-second. Something behind her face softened in a way Marie did not quite trust herself to interpret. "Good," and went. The door closed. Marie sat for a long time looking at the tray. Bread still warm, soft white cheese, a small bowl of dark honey, a clay cup of something that turned out, when she lifted it, to be hot milk with a thread of cinnamon in it. Kaylin had once told her that the savage king of Hollowreach broke his tribute brides over breakfast, because breakfast was when they were stupidest with hope. She drank the cinnamon milk. She ate the bread. She fed a small corner of the cheese to Van, who took it gravely. She got up and walked to the trunk at the foot of the bed and stood over it. The silver-handled whip still lay across the lid. The torchlight from last night was gone, replaced by the cold blue of a moor dawn. And in the cold blue, the whip looked exactly like what it was. A prop, chosen for staging, picked because it would catch light. She crouched. She did not lift the whip. She put her nose instead an inch above the leather of it and breathed in. Kaylin's hands. Kaylin's oils. Kaylin's bench in the tack room where he had sat polishing the silver throat of it 3 nights ago, while she made him supper. Under all of that, faint, but absolutely present, the scent of a second man she did not know. The man Kaylin had bought the whip from, probably. Some borderland merchant who specialized in stage dressing. The whip had never been used, not once. It had been bought to be seen on top of a trunk. She closed her eyes. She breathed out. There was a sound behind her at the door. Not a knock this time, just the awareness of presence, and she turned and the king was standing in the open doorway, with one shoulder against the frame, watching her crouch over the trunk. She did not know how long he had been there. He did not say anything for a moment. Then very quietly, "What did it tell you?" "That it was never used." His mouth did the thing that was not quite a smile. "Stand up, Marie." It was the first time he had said her name. She heard him choose to say it. She heard the choice happen. He took her up onto the wall. She had not expected that. She had expected, vaguely, a throne room and a list of grievances, and perhaps, if Shanna was right and the keep was honest, a contract laid on a table with quill and ink. Instead, he led her up a narrow stair behind a tapestry she had not noticed, and they came out onto the south curtain wall of Hollowreach in a wind that smelled of heather and wet stone and, very far away, the iron of the border. He walked along the wall the way other men walked along corridors, at home, unguarded, his coat open. She stayed at his shoulder because his stride had shortened by a quarter to let her. He stopped at a merlon and put one hand on it and looked south, and she looked south with him. And somewhere out there past 3 valleys was the kennel house where Kaelin would now be opening the day's letters. "Ashfall's border massacre," he said, without preamble. "Tell me about it." She had been ready for the question since the road. She had not been ready for him to ask it like a man asking after weather. "6 of your patrol," she said. 3 of our hunters. The hunters were drunk. They crossed your line because they had been told it had moved. They were told it had moved because Kaelin told them. His head turned a quarter inch toward her. "You know that." "I know it now." "When did you know?" "Last night, when I smelled the whip." "And before last night?" "I knew he came home smelling of your border. I told myself it was old smoke off other men. I told myself, because he is my mate, that I owed him the smaller story." Mate. He did not say it cruelly. He said it the way a man says a word he is testing the weight of. "By whose ceremony?" "Ashfall's, 3 years ago." "Witnessed by his father." She did not say the rest. She did not need to. His mouth did the not quite smile again, and she understood, with a small, clean shock, that he had read what she had not said. Ashfall ceremonies witnessed only by blood kin of the groom were not recognized by half the packs of the north. Hollowreach was one of the half. By the law he stood on, here on this wall, Kaelin had no mate claim on her that he could not also pack in a trunk and ship north. "Your gift," he said. "Tell me about it." She told him. She told him about the kennels and the breeding pens and the trainer who had figured out, when she was 9, that she could smell the difference between a wolf who would bite a child for sport and a wolf who would bite a child to keep it from running into a road. She told him about the years of being walked through holding cells and asked, with a hand on her shoulder, which of these men is lying? She told him about the bag of coin Ashfall had been paid every time her nose had been right, and how none of those coins had ever come to her. She did not tell him yet about the way the gift was running one direction in this keep, toward him, toward Shauna, toward Vaughn, and not the other. She wanted him to ask. He asked. And on me. She kept her eyes on the south horizon. Honest. Honest how? Honest cruelty. You have killed. You will kill again. Not one of them was, or will be, someone who didn't earn it. The whip on your belt has been used. The whip in my trunk has not. You frighten this keep on purpose, because the keep behaves when frightened, and dies when coddled. You did not frighten me last night when you picked up the whip, because you were not deciding whether to use it on me. You were deciding whether I had brought it to be used on me, and by whom. A long silence. She heard him breathe out. And what do you read on me right now? A choice. Name it. She turned her face up to him. The scar at his mouth was paler in the daylight, the kind of scar a blade leaves when it has been pulled across bone. You have decided, she said. to speak to me differently than you speak to everyone else in this keep, and you are choosing not to let any of them see you do it. And you are about to tell me why. For the first time, you looked surprised. It moved across his face like a shadow underwater and was gone. And then he did something she had not expected and would replay later in the dark. He laughed. Once. Low, not loud, not for the wall to hear. For her. 3 years, he said. I have been waiting to meet someone I could not lie to. You can lie to me. I cannot lie to you usefully. No. He looked back south. The wind pulled the edge of his coat. Marie, the keep below us is not kind. The men in it respect 3 things: strength, consistency, and the absence of mercy toward anyone who has earned its opposite. I have given them all 3 for 11 years. I will continue to. I will not soften in front of them. I will not soften toward them. If you stand at my side in this keep, you will stand at the side of the man they think I am, because the day they think I am anyone else is the day Hollow Reach goes back to eating its own children. And I have not spent 11 years pulling its teeth to put them back in for the comfort of one woman. A pause. But, she waited. But in the rooms with the doors closed, he said very quietly, and on this wall, and at the table where you take your bread, and in the grove tonight when the moon is up, I will speak to you in a register I do not give them. Not because you have earned it by being delicate, because you have earned it by walking into this hall last night and not pretending the whip was yours. The savagery in this keep is real, Marie. I am the savagery in this keep. I am simply, with you, going to choose differently. And I am telling you I am choosing, because I will not have you mistake it later for something I always was. She did not answer for a long moment. The wind moved. Van the Crow landed on the Merlon between them and pecked at a fleck of lichen and ignored them both. At last, she said, I have been mistaking choices for nature for 3 years. I would prefer to see this one happen. His hand, when it found hers on the stone of the Merlon, was warm and rough and did not grip. It rested. Then watch. By mid-morning, Shanna had her in a dress the color of moor heather, soft gray-purple wool with sleeves to the wrist and a high straight collar that hid the place a tribute collar would have sat. And Marie understood the dress the moment she put it on. It was not seductive. It was not virginal. It was not a costume of any kind. It was the kind of dress a working noblewoman of Hollow Reach might wear, to ride the border in autumn. And Shanna had laid it out for her with the matter-of-factness of a woman who had been told by her king to dress this girl like a queen who had not been made one yet. You'll do. Your hair down or up? Down. Good. The court will hate it more. Marie surprised herself by laughing. Shanna's mouth twitched, pleased, and she handed her a small carved horn comb. Keep this. It was his mother's. He gave it to me yesterday morning when the rider came ahead of your cart and said the tribute was a half-blood from the Ashfall kennels with a nose. He said to give it to you if you turned out to be the kind that would use a comb, not the kind that would throw it. When did he decide I was the kind? About 4 words in. Marie's hand closed on the comb. It was warm from Shanna's pocket. The carving along the spine was a small running wolf with a bird on its back. And she felt, looking at it, a small, unfair pang at the thought of a woman who had once owned this comb and who had not lived to give it to her son's wife herself. Shanna. The tribute mates before me. Shanna's face did not change, but her hand stilled where she had been folding the slip of black silk back into the trunk without looking at it. Ah, he said they walked out, marked. They did. By him? No. Shanna looked at her then, square. By their own packs when they got home. 2 of them came here for sanctuary, child. The Hollow Reach receiving hall is loud, and the chains at the gate are loud, and the king is loud, and that is on purpose, because the packs that send tribute brides north send them with instructions, and the instructions sometimes include not coming back unmarked. He stages the arrival for the watchers their packs send with them. He buys the watchers drink. He puts the bride in a room with a lock on her side of the door. And by the next moon, the watchers go home and tell the alpha who sent them whatever lie the alpha needed to hear. And the girl stays here, in my kitchen, or in the weaver's hall, or with the herders, or, twice, on a horse south to a cousin who would take her in. The marks the packs see on tribute brides who leave Hollow Reach are marks the packs put on them themselves, when the bride is sent back inconveniently whole. He cannot stop that at the other end. He stopped it at this one. Marie sat down on the edge of the bed. She put the comb on her knee. Then the stories. The stories are useful to him. He does not correct them. He encourages them. The Borderlands respect a monster more than they respect a man, and the alphas who would otherwise send their daughters here in coffins send them here in carriages instead, because they think he will do the work for them. He doesn't. And then they go home, and the daughters are quietly absorbed into Hollow Reach, and the alphas counted as cleansed. And Ashfall. Shanna's mouth tightened. Ashfall is the first pack in 11 years to send a bride with a packed trunk. Kaelin packed it. Yes, he meant for the king to use it. Yes. Marie sat with that. She had thought she had sat with it already, on the wall this morning, but a thing like that does not sit once. It sits in layers. She had not, until this moment, fully understood that her husband of 3 years had not simply been willing for her to be tortured to death by a stranger. He had selected the implements. He had folded the silk under them. He had chosen the order in which the king would lift each item out of the trunk and what each item would suggest about the woman it had been packed for. He had staged her death like a tableau. And the only reason she was alive in a heather gray dress with a carved horn comb on her knee was that the man he had cast as her killer had taken one look at the staging and asked, without raising his voice, "Who packed this trunk?" Van flew in through the open window and landed on the bedpost. Shanna looked at the crow. The crow looked at Shanna. "That bird followed your cart." "He did." "Ashfall bird." "He was. He thinks he isn't anymore." "Smart bird." Marie reached up and touched Van's chest, where the feathers were warmest. Her gift opened on him the way it had opened on him every day of his life, and gave her, for the first time, the full sentence of him. A small, warm, intelligent loyalty that had been pointed at Kaelin because Kaelin had fed him, and was now, quietly and absolutely, pointed at her because she had not. Under the loyalty, threaded through the dusty feather smell and the grain smell and the faint metallic tang of the leather band still buckled around his right ankle, was a trace of paper. Old paper. Ink. Kaelin's ink. She unbuckled the band. There was a small folded square tucked into it, no bigger than her thumbnail. She unfolded it. The hand was Kaelin's. The words were not for her. "If she lives past the first night, kill the king in the grove at moonrise. Witness it. Bring the bird back." She read it twice. She set it on her knee next to the comb. Shanna, who had come closer without seeming to move, read it over her shoulder and went very still. There is a man in this keep who reports to Ashfall. He has been here 11 years. He has been waiting for a bride who would bring him instructions. Yes. He'll be at the Grove tonight. Yes. Marie looked up. Get me the king. Shanna did not move toward the door. She looked at Marie for a long moment with an expression Marie did not yet have a name for. Something between recognition and something older than recognition. A woman who had spent a long career feeding a hard man and was watching for the first time a second person walk into the kitchen and take a spoon. No, gently. You bring it to him yourself. He's on the wall. He has been on the wall since he left you this morning, because he cannot decide whether he is allowed to be in the same room with you twice in one day before the moon is up. And on the wall, he can pretend he is doing something else. Take the paper. Take the bird. Take the comb in your sleeve so your hands have something to remember. Go. She found him where Shanna had said he would be, at the same merlawn, his coat open in the same wind. He did not turn at her step, but his shoulders shifted half an inch in a way that told her he had heard her on the stair before she had reached the door. She came up beside him and set the folded paper on the stone between them. He read it without picking it up. The wind tried to take it, and he pinned it with one finger. Whose hand? Kaelin's. Whose ankle? Van's. A long silence. The crow, who had ridden up on her shoulder, hopped down to the merlin and stood between them like a third witness. The king looked at the bird. The bird looked back, perfectly composed, the way crows look at kings. The man in this keep. Shanna says he has been here 11 years. I have 3 candidates. Narrow it. He almost smiled. He picked up the paper, folded it once more, and slid it inside his coat. I will. By the Grove. He looked at her then, fully, and she felt his choice happen again. The second time she had watched it, and the first time she had watched it knowing what it was. He was not softening. He was selecting. He was taking the version of himself that walked the keep below and setting it aside, here on this wall, for her. She watched him set it aside the way a man sets down a sword before he enters a sick room. Marie. Yes. If I had picked up that whip last night and used it on you, you wouldn't have. If I had, she did not look away. Then my gift would have told me in the first breath that the cruelty in this room was pointed wrong, and I would have run for the window, and Van would have gone with me, and you would have woken up tomorrow morning, still the savage alpha king of Hollowreach, with one more bride story to encourage. We would not be standing on this wall. No. We are standing on this wall. We are. He turned his body toward her, and the wind moved his coat, and the scar at his mouth caught the noon light. He did not lift his hand to her face. He did not touch her hair. He stood half a step closer than he had stood this morning, which on this wall, in this wind, was a vow. I want to be clear with you, he said, because I have watched men in my life become unclear with women and lose the women for it. I am not going to court you. I do not know how. I am going to tell you what I am choosing every time I choose it, until you tell me to stop telling you. Tonight at moonrise, I am going to stand under the Grove Oak with you, in front of a court that watched you come in last night in tribute chains. And I am going to put my mark on your shoulder, and the court is going to read it as a king claiming a prize. That is the version of the ceremony they need. Underneath that version, there is going to be a different one, which is the version where I am asking you, in front of my mother's grove, and on the night a man your husband sent is going to try to kill me there, whether you will have me. I am asking you now, so that when I ask you in front of them, you already know what you are answering." She had not expected to cry. She did not, in fact, cry. Her eyes stung once, and her throat did the brief, useless thing it had done with Shanna this morning. And then she breathed in once through her nose, and her gift opened on him the way it had been opening on him all day. And there it was, under the iron and the smoke and the green tonic and the wind off the moor. That single steady line of song held under all the noise, one true note threading the air of the wall, like something that had finally found somewhere to land. She did not say it aloud. She would not waste it on the wall. She said, instead, "Yes." His eyes closed once, only once, then opened, and he was the king again, because the keep below them did not get to see what had just moved across his face, and neither, in this moment, did she. She would see it later, in the room with the door closed. He turned the conversation, because he was a man and a king, and the wind was getting up, to logistics. "The Grove tonight. Kalen's man will move on me at the binding when my back is to the court. I will be expecting him. I do not want you near him. Stay at my left." Van stays on your shoulder. "If the man comes, I will deal with him. If a second man comes, and there may be a second man, because Kalen does not strike me as the sort who would send one, Shanna will deal with him." Shanna came north from Ashfall 22 years ago, because the man who is now Kalen's father broke her sister's neck for refusing him. I do not ask Shanna to do many things. She has asked, since the rider came yesterday morning, for this one. Marie's hand went up to her sleeve, where the carved horn comb was. The wolf with the bird on its back. She had wondered why Shanna had given her a comb that did not match any other carving in the room. She understood now that the comb had not been chosen to match the room. It had been chosen to match her. And the third man? He did not blink. There is no third man. 3 candidates this morning. 2 of them have, in the last hour, accepted invitations to ride south with a cattle drive that leaves at dusk. The one who did not accept the invitation is the one Shanna will be standing behind tonight, with a knife she has been carrying for 22 years and not used. Marie looked at him. The king of Hollowreach, who had told her on this wall not 3 minutes ago that he did not know how to court her, had spent the morning narrowing 3 names to 1 and arranging the other 2 out of the building so that the woman who had fed his court since he was 9 could finally, at last, put down a knife she had been carrying since before he was crowned. He had done all of this, and then he had asked her, in front of his mother's grove and his mother's wind, if she would have him. "You absolute liar," she said, very quietly. "You know exactly how to court." His mouth did the not quite smile, and this time she saw it finish. It was small and crooked and surprised at itself, and it was, she realized, the first thing in this keep that had ever been only for her. "Marie? Go and eat something. The moon is up in 4 hours." The grove was older than the keep. She felt that before she saw it. The path from the south postern wound down through a stand of pine that thinned, at the bottom, into a clearing of standing stones around a single oak so broad at the base that 3 men holding hands could not have ringed it. The oak's bark was black-gray in the moon-rising light, and the carvings on the standing stones were old in the way that meant no one currently alive could read them. Hollowreach's court had come down ahead of her in 2 long lines, and they stood now between the stones, their cloaks dark against the snow at the roots, their faces, all of them, turned to the gap in the trees where she was going to come through. She had been told by Shauna that she would walk the path alone. She had been told by the king that he would be waiting at the oak. She had been told by neither of them that she would feel the moment her foot touched the grove path, every scent in the clearing open on her at once, like a cord struck across a hall. Wool, pine, snow, iron. Old blood at the base of the standing stones, very old, ceremonial, not cruel. Wax, hot pitch from the torches. 53 people by her count, breathing in the cold. And under all of it, the single, steady line of song she had first caught off him at the threshold last night, and again on the wall this morning. Louder now, because she was walking toward it. Because the grove was small, and the source was 20 paces away under the oak, and looking, she did not need to lift her head to know. At her. She lifted her head anyway. The court parted. She walked through. She wore the heather-gray wool and the carved horn comb at her temple, and Van the crow on her left shoulder, and her hands were empty because Shauna had said empty hands tonight, and the moon was clearing the eastern ridge as she reached the oak. The king was in black. He had taken the coat off. The shirt under it was plain, sleeves rolled, and the scar at his mouth was silver in the moonlight, and the whip was not at his belt. He had left the whip in the keep. He did not reach for her hand. He inclined his head very slightly, the way a man bows to a thing he is choosing not to own. And she understood this was the version of the ceremony for the court, that she had walked here on her own legs, that he had not pulled her, that the chain story would die in this grove tonight, and the court would carry the death of it back up the path. The bonding officiant was an old woman with white braids and a staff of pale wood, and she spoke the old words in a voice that carried because the grove carried it for her. Names were given. His, Marie's. The court answered. Vows were spoken in the form of questions, and Marie answered each one, and her voice did not shake because she had answered the real version of these questions on the wall at noon, and the version in the grove was, after that, easy. The officiant stepped back. The king turned to her. The court behind him went very still. She felt, in the second before he moved, 3 things at once. She felt his hand come up to her jaw with a gentleness that should not have been possible from a hand that size. She felt Van shift on her shoulder, tense, watching not the king, but past him, into the dark beyond the third standing stone on the left, where a man had taken 1 step too many forward. And she felt, from that man, the sour green undercopper she had been smelling her whole life on Kaylin, and never been allowed to name. Honest cruelty pointed wrong, pointed at the back of the king, who was lowering his face toward her shoulder. Her hand closed on the king's forearm, not to stop him, to tell him. He understood. He did not turn. He did not break the moment for the court. He simply, as his mouth came down toward the curve where her neck met her shoulder, said 1 word into her skin, in a voice no one else heard. Now. 3 things happened at once. Shayna, who had moved up behind the man at the third stone, the way kitchen women move without anyone noticing, put a knife she had been carrying for 22 years up under his ribs, and held it there until his weight went onto it. Van the crow launched off Marie's shoulder with a single hard caw and crossed the grove low and fast and struck a second man. There had been a second man, of course there had been, in the face just as the second man was lifting a short bow from inside his cloak, and the arrow that had been meant for the king's back went sideways into the snow at the foot of the oak. And Marie? Marie, who had been told her whole life that her gift ran one direction, that she was a reader and not a doer, that her bloodline ended at her nose. Marie felt something open in her chest that was not a hum and not a thread
and not a pull, but a heat. A small, clean, silver heat, the size of a hand, the shape of a hand, and the hand was over the king's heart, where his shirt met her palm, and she had not put her palm there, but it was there now, and the silver was in it. And the second man with the bow, who had not stayed down when Van hit him, who was lifting a second arrow already knocked, looked at her across the grove, and his arrow caught fire in his hands. Not metaphor. Fire. Pale silver fire that did not burn the snow at his feet, did not burn the standing stones, did not burn Shayna 10 paces away. It burned the arrow, and it burned the bow, and it burned, when he opened his mouth to scream, the green under copper out of him, the corruption Kaelin had paid him in for 11 years. And what was left when the silver went out was a man on his knees in the snow, with empty hands and a face that had nothing left to lie with. The grove was silent. The king's mouth was still at her shoulder. He had not moved. He had not flinched. He had felt the silver come up under her palm, and he had stayed exactly where he was, because he had understood, before she had, that what was happening was hers and not to be reached for. He closed the last half-inch, his teeth set, gentle and absolute, in the soft place where her neck met her shoulder, and the claiming mark settled into her skin with a small, clean sting, and her gift, which had been open on the whole grove for the last 4 minutes, narrowed all at once to a single point, which was him. Bonded. The court, 53 breaths in the cold, drew in as one. The officiant, who had seen many bondings and never one with silver fire in it, lowered her staff very slowly to the snow and went on to one knee. The court followed. Shauna, with her knife still in the man at the 3rd stone, did not kneel, because Shauna did not kneel for anyone. But she met Marie's eye across the clearing and inclined her head once, and Marie understood she had just been claimed by Hollowreach in a register the keep had not used in 11 years. Queen. The king lifted his mouth from her shoulder. He did not step back. He looked down at her. The court was on its knees, and his second would-be killer was on his in the snow, and his mother's grove had just lit up silver under his bonded mate's hand, and the savage alpha king of Hollowreach, in the only register he was ever going to give her in front of 53 witnesses, said, "Hello, wife." She laughed, once, low, not loud, for him. The court would later say that the new queen of Hollowreach laughed at her king under the grove oak the moment after she set a man on fire, and that the king, who had not been known to smile in 11 years, smiled back. The court would say a great many things in the weeks to come. The court would not, ever again, say that Hollowreach broke its tribute rides. Van the Crow, who had killed no one tonight, but had bought the king of Hollowreach the half-second he needed not to die, landed back on Marie's shoulder and made the small chuck-chuck noise that had once meant, in a kennel loft very far away, that he was hungry and forgiving her for it. Marie reached up with the hand that was not on the king's heart and touched the soft place under his beak. There was a man somewhere south of here, 3 valleys away, sitting at a long oak table in the gray hour before dawn, drinking bitter tea, waiting for a bird that was not coming back. She kept thinking about the moment Rurik set the whip down on the lid of the trunk instead of on her back, the smallest motion in the whole story, and the one the rest of it grew out of. If you had been kneeling on that black stone with the torchlight on the silver handle, and the man you had been promised to as prey had asked you, in 4 words, "Who packed this trunk?" what would you have said? I'd love to know. See you in the next story.